Did you know Long's Products is a family-owned janitorial supply with mops, brooms, trash bags, and they even have food service disposables, carry-out plates, and to-goes? Check us out.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for a special edition of Let's Talk here on UrbanCast. Tonight's conversation is not about blame. It's about awareness, understanding, and action. Our city, like so many others, is hurting. Families are grieving. Children are making life-altering decisions far too young and far too often. Those choices are leading them into courtrooms, prison cells. We know that many of our viewers are parents, grandparents, guardians who want to do the right by their next generation. And sometimes doing right means hearing hard truths, even the ones we may not be ready for. That's why tonight we're speaking with defense attorney Thomas Davenport Jr. He's someone who has sat across from young defendants and their families, many of whom have never imagined they'd be in that position. He understands the weight of those cases and what truly at stake. Our goal tonight is to inform and encourage, not just to raise awareness, but to help families have the difficult conversations before it is too late. We invite you to stay with us, ask questions in the comments. We definitely encourage you to share this broadcast because if it reaches just one person, just one, or one family, just one, it's worth it. Let's talk. Tommy, how you doing today?
Jack, I'm doing pretty good. I'm making it, and I'm very happy to be here. And you said something that made me think of a friend of mine named Don Clarkston.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about the difficult conversation, and he always says, if you can't talk about something, it'll kill you. And he's right. So, I'm trying to balance that with the three things I've always been told you can't talk to people about: politics, religion, and how to raise children. And
Yeah.
But I think this is something that we should discuss. We should have a round table with a lot of people.
A lot of people, Tom. A lot of people. Could you begin and introduce yourself, Tom, and share how long you've been practicing criminal defense here in the state of Louisiana?
Sure. Well, I'm Tommy. Everybody calls me Tommy Davenport. I'm from Alexandria. I've been practicing law here for about 24 years. And I actually kind of started before that in law school. We had a little criminal clinic that we would run at Southern University. And I actually handled cases then, but I've handled a lot of criminal cases. That's my primary focus. It's a very challenging, difficult trade, profession, whatever you want to call it. It's very difficult to do. You see a lot of hardships. You really do. I got to tell you, some people, I think they see lawyers on TV and they think we have a lifestyle and we're always in the fast lane and having a 3-martini lunch and eating caviar and things of that nature. And the reality is we go through a lot of aspirin. We have a lot of sleepless nights, and we carry a lot of stress with us over our clients and the cases. But, yeah.
Tommy, what's the first thing that goes through your mind when a young person is focusing on a serious charge, like attempted murder or second-degree murder?
I got to tell you, the very first thing is that I think normally this kid's life is over in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
One, just the arrest is going to make a record entry that follows this person, this child, for the rest of his or her life. So you have that right off the bat before you even have a trial, before you get to anything. You know that this child is going to have a marred record that's going to cause all kind of problems. And then comes the gravity of the situation, which is the charge. And a lot of these cases, see, Louisiana really, I hate to say it this way, but let's just be frank. Louisiana does not play around with people. We were the prison capital of the world at one time. And I mean, very recently, we might be back to number one now. If we're not number one, we're number two. I want y'all to think about that. Compared to our little population in Louisiana, compared to countries like China, Russia, and India, and places like huge populations, and some places where they don't believe in justice and due process, we are the prison capital of the world. Well, that might not mean a whole lot to some people, but you got to have people in prison to be the prison capital of the world. We're not the capital of the nicest prisons or the best prisons or the prettiest prisons. It's because we have more people in prison per capita than anybody else. So the idea that such a young person's life is essentially over, it is very bothersome, because there's a whole other reality, which is what happens in prison. And when you're young and you're firm in all the right places, you're going to have some problems when you go to prison. So, but it's difficult to see, because that this child, even if it's a very young adult, it'll never have the life he had or she had moments before the accusation. Jack, I'll tell you, there was a time in my career where if you were just arrested for a felony, you had that record forever. The government would kind of try to do you a favor and say, well, what we'll do is we won't let the public get it, wink.
Mhm.
But there's any kind of good job that you might want, we're going to let them know about it. And of course, we as the government, we know about it. So even if you were just mistakenly arrested, or there really wasn't nothing to it, or maybe you were innocent, you still had that forever. I mean, imagine you're trying to get a job one day, as you want to be the manager of Lowe's or Home Depot. And they're all, well, Mr. Jack, I got to ask you here. It says here you were arrested for attempted murder. Compared to someone who doesn't have a record, I mean, who do you think is going to get that job? It's heartbreaking, Jack. Just to be honest with you, it's very heartbreaking.
And how difficult, Tommy? A lot of people think, I guess they have in their mind, I can go get me an attorney, I'll get out. And as we know, within the last year, the laws in the state of Louisiana has significantly changed as it pertains to, incarceration of adults and youth. So how difficult is it to defend a young client who's caught on video bragging about a shooting on social media?
Well, let's break that down in two parts, right? When you go to trial, the defense lawyer's job is to test the sufficiency of the case against the accused. That's really what we've always done. We test the sufficiency of the case. That is, did the police make the right conclusions? Did they, error in their judgment? Did they omit evidence? Were they giving information from someone who had a motive to give certain information. You have all these hurdles that we address. Okay. If it's on video, I mean, and there's just a video of someone committing a crime, I have to tell you that unless there's some legal justification for the crime, you're not looking at an issue of guilt or innocence at that point. The real question is going to become, well, how much time is this person going to get in prison? And that's for the person who committed a crime and it was recorded. The one who gets on social media and brags, I got to tell you, I had a case one time where someone did that and did not commit the crime, but wanted to be, I guess, glorified or seen as, I'm going to be the baddest person in town. I'm tough. I'm something because I did this. I don't know what the motivation was. I suspect it came down to an undeveloped mind of a teenager. Then you have people on a jury who are going to say, well, why would this person say he committed this if he didn't do it? And if it's a true juvenile case, that's a reasonable question for even the most seasoned, wise judge. So, there's a lot of people who do that, even on text messages. It doesn't even have to be on social media. If you just send a text message to your friend or someone you think is your friend, you have a problem. So it's not even a point of, do you have a case? It's really, what can we do to mitigate what it is that you have admitted to? Now, sometimes people admit to crimes because they want to be famous or popular or whatever, and they didn't do it. And sometimes you can disprove it. And then ultimately that person looks a little slow. Why would you admit to a crime you didn't commit? And, it's bad news all the way around.
So what do you want, from your perspective as an attorney, what do you want parents or grandparents to understand about what happens after their child is arrested? And always the objective is to even prevent that from even happening, Tommy. But what just say hypothetical. And again, let me step back a little bit. One of the main reasons why we're having this conversation is to make sure that parents and grandparents and guardians know what the magnitude of what they are getting ready to get themselves into. And if we could just only start talking, getting the right resources, if you see something that your child is doing, say something. But again, what do you want parents and grandparents to understand about what happens after the child is arrested for this violent crime?
To answer that, I'd like to change your question and come back if that's okay.
Go for it.
Let's have the talk on the front end.
Okay.
And I have an idea. I think parents and grandparents who love their children and grandchildren should bring their children into the bathroom. Close the door. No tablets, no cell phones, nothing. And if someone needs to go potty, well, you can go potty right in front of us because that's how it works in prison. Okay. Now think about this. Every parent is going to know exactly what I mean by this when I say it. Imagine you're going on a family vacation. Kids in the back seat. After about an hour, what do you think is going to happen with them kids? They're going to start fighting. They start fighting. They can't get along. Everybody's going to have a good time and they can't get along. And these are people that's your family. So imagine being locked up in a bathroom, a very small, confined area with people who love and care about you. Just imagine that for a second and then have that discussion. What would it take for you to voluntarily agree to spend your life like this in a small confined area with other people. Now, that's the front end conversation. That is what you're going to go through if you end up making these dumb decisions in life. This is the consequence. Now, hopefully that'll prevent the second part, which is the question you asked me. What do we do when the child has been arrested? Well, I'll tell you right now. Every year I close my office before Christmas because it got to the point to where the telephone calls from mothers and grandmothers wanting to get their babies out of prison for the holidays, it has become too unbearable. Jack, I want you to really listen to this. I want everybody to listen to this. The calls that I normally would receive the week leading up to Christmas are some of the most heartbreaking conversations I have had with people, and they all say the same thing. I want my baby home for Christmas. It's terrible. So what do you tell them when the arrest happens? Well, you're going to go through the worst stress and worry that you have ever had. You are going to be embroiled into a never-ending game of danger, because when hopefully your child is out of jail, but if it's a violent crime, chances are your child will not be out of jail. And then the phone calls come in. Mama, they're not feeding me. Daddy, somebody's hurting me. I'm not getting the medical care that I need. I don't have a blanket and it's freezing in here. And can you imagine, just for a second, because I think parents tend to be dismissive. That'll never happen to me. That's not going to be my child. It's always someone's child. Every time. It is always somebody's child that's going through this. Okay? So that alone, just the stress and the worry that you can't touch your child. There's no hugs. There's no handshakes. If you're lucky, you get to go once, twice a month and maybe talk on a telephone and see your child with this blank stare. Sometimes you see the injuries they've received in the lockup. Sometimes you see how much weight they have lost, because they're not being fed properly, or they're not getting to eat because somebody's taking their food. And then I don't even want to get into the things that sometimes happen in jail. Okay. Mm-hmm. But, and then here's the other thing. You have the trial, the investigation. It is so hard as a lawyer working with a client who is actually incarcerated, because you can't really get into things freely. You have to worry about, is somebody in my dorm or my cell going to overhear these discussions or read some of the correspondences and then go to the government and say, hey, Jack told me he did da-da-da-da-da. I will testify to that if you let me out. That happens every day. So you have to be so guarded dealing with them. And usually, from my experience, the first person that the families get upset with is the lawyer, because we can't move fast enough. We have all these burdens. We have deadlines that the courts set or may not set. We have to deal with other cases. We have other clients. Sometimes in just a case, it's a matter of just getting the file, and most people don't understand the system. And then the thing that is the bane of my existence is you might have inmates giving legal advice. And then, oh, this is what you do. And I've had family members argue with me until they were blue in the face. And I've just had to tell them, if this jailhouse lawyer is so good, why is he in jail? You know? And then the other thing is what people have to do to pay. Yes, you can get a public defender. And I got to tell you, there are some fabulous public defenders. I know somebody's rolling their eyes right now that I said that. Okay. Let me tell you what the problem is. Yes, are there some sorry public defenders? Yes, there are. Are there some sorry police officers? Absolutely. There is sorry in any profession. Okay. Plumbers, baker, you name it. There's going to be the sorry type. Mm-hmm. The problem with the public defender system as a whole is the lack of funding. You don't have funding for investigators. You don't have funding for experts. And these lawyers are given just an insane burden of cases. You know, the system is broke in that regard. But let's say you're fortunate and you have a good job. Okay? If you save money for that child to go to college, that money's gone. I've watched families have to put a second mortgage on a house, empty out all their retirements, borrow money from family members. And here's the thing. Even if you have millions of dollars available to you and you can get the best in the nation to represent your child, there's no guarantee. Even if you are innocent, there is no guarantee that you're going to get out of jail. This is a brother to me. This is Daryl Burton. Okay, this is a book he wrote. Okay, it's almost 400. It's over 400 pages. Yes, it's 500 and something pages. Let me tell y'all about Daryl Burton. Okay, Daryl was a young man. Okay, he got accused of a murder he did not commit. He ended up spending 24 years in a Missouri State Penitentiary before his name was cleared and he was given his life back. 24 years of not going to school and climbing the corporate ladder. 24 years of not making Social Security contributions. Nothing. His life was just put on pause. He went in, people were listening to 8 tracks. He came out and everybody's on an iPod. He didn't even know what that was. And he was innocent. So this is why I say just because you're innocent doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. Should it work every time? Yes. Does it work every time? No. And that's the scary part. There's any criminal defense lawyer will tell you the hardest client to represent is the innocent one.
Wow. Oh, wow. What do you say, Tommy, to the young person who doesn't fully understand what's at stake before going to trial? And if you can tie that in, Tommy, to that decision, if they're accused, I know you're a defendant and they're accused, they haven't admitted anything or whatever, but if they are guilty of it and we want to be as proactive as we possibly can, what do you say to that young person out there, man, before you even have to, what's at stake before going to trial? I mean, if you could tie the two things together, that decision that got them where they are, even if it's just getting in the wrong car with somebody, Tom, or whatever.
Yeah. You know, the smallest pebble can make a pretty big ripple in a lake, you know. And so if you made a small but bad decision, like I was saying to begin with, you're going to have an arrest record. That arrest record will probably prevent you from getting scholarships, grants, things like that if you want to go to school. If you don't, it's probably going to stop you from going to the military. It's probably going to stop you from getting a good job for the rest of your life. for the rest of your life. That's just the arrest. If you get convicted, you're depending on the case, like if it's a first degree murder situation, you may very well get the death penalty. And there was a bill introduced very recently to speed that process up, because apparently there's some politicians in this state who do not believe that we're killing people fast enough.
That's right.
And I don't want to have that discussion with people, but I will say the first story I remember my mama telling me was about a man who was wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death, but it was on a crucifix. So I have a lot of issues with the death penalty, but even if you go to prison, a short sentence is usually like 10 years. Okay. 10, 20, 30, 40 years in prison. That's 10, 20, 30, 40 years of your life gone. And I think, Jack, what it comes down to is we know as a society, children do not have the mental development to understand what is really going on. They really don't. I mean, I'm going to speak for myself because I don't want to offend anybody, but I know when I was 18, I did not see the world the same as I did when I was 21. And when I'm 50 now, and I don't see the world the same as I did 10 years ago. That's how much, your mind grows. And any older person will tell you that. And a lot of young people want to be dismissive of it. Mm-hmm. So I think they totally, or at least largely, lack the ability to understand the consequences. And there is a simple way of doing it. And that is, Angola gives tours. But, some people, I've watched this, they got these scared straight kind of things. They bring them to prison and try to show people, what it's like. And it's totally lost because it's not real. But it is real, folks. I'm telling you, every day somebody is going to prison. I promise you, in this state for sure, probably, I'd hate to know how many across the state go to prison every day. And then when I think of like my brother Daryl Burton, when I was telling you about earlier, some of the horrors he told me. He told me a story one time where a serial killer was in the lockup with him, and someone tried to kill him over stamps, just postage stamps. And you're living in a place where, depending on who you are, what you look like, what organization you may be associated with, you're subject to getting killed, raped, maimed at any time. There's by example, I kind of wish, I know I'm going to upset my wife, she's an English teacher. Mm-hmm. I wish we would stop going over things like the Odyssey and Romeo and Juliet and read things like this book right here, Solitary by Albert Woodfox. This man went to prison in Louisiana for a crime that he did commit. There's no question about it. He had a 50-year sentence. And while he was there, he was accused, and I think he was convicted in what he characterizes as a sham trial. I wasn't there. I didn't watch it. He spent 40 years in solitary confinement. 40 years. So I'm sure there's some purpose with reading Romeo and Juliet and Frankenstein and some of those. This is what we should be looking at. This is the realness of society. There is a certain coldness of prison. And unfortunately, it's like a haunted house. Nobody really knows what it's like until they get in it. Well, I can't tell you that I have experienced this personally, but when you're young and you go to prison, you're going to end up having to do a lot of things you don't want to do. You might be tough on the street because you can get a gun or a blade or something like that. when you get inside certain prisons, you're nothing. You're absolutely nothing. Now, you were asking about, well, what about whenever you get in a car with the wrong person? Okay, this happens all the time. You might have 2 or 3 kids riding around, and maybe somebody has a little narcotics with them. Well, usually the police just arrest everybody, and then they start pointing fingers because they don't want to get in trouble. It's very rarely will that ever happen and someone say, well, it's my dope, it's mine. Sometimes it happens, but it's pretty rare. Well, then you get arrested, and then if you're fortunate, you won't go to prison. You're going to have that record. They're going to be watching you. You're going to be under a curfew. You're going to have to answer to probably a probation officer. And as soon as you screw up, you're going in. And what I really wish young people could see and understand is Louisiana as a state has a financial incentive for putting people in prison.
Say that a little louder so the people in the back of the room really understand what you're saying when you say that, Tom.
The state of Louisiana has a financial incentive. Let me tell you what that means is. That means the state makes money with people in prison. Okay? This state has 2 private prisons. Okay? 4-profit prisons. And they have agreements with the state of Louisiana to keep no less than 96% of the prison at capacity. Sometimes they get bonuses if it's at or exceeds capacity. And since you are in a prison, especially one for profit, well, it's like any business. They're going to cut down on any kind of unnecessary expense. So that means you might eat a bologna sandwich for lunch and dinner. That means you might be making sometimes, believe it or not, underwear for another business to sell. You might be engaging in various things for some corporation can profit. Just to be frank with you, Jack, you are just a modern day slave. There is no difference between what is going on now versus what was going on before the conclusion of the Civil War. The difference is we like to pretend that we're more civilized. Okay? But we're doing the same thing. In fact, Angola came about from that same purpose. Okay? I'm going to tell you this, Jack. I don't want to get off topic, but I want people to understand how the system truly works, the ugliness of it. Before the Civil War, the prison population in Louisiana were people who looked like me. People like me were the majority of the people in prison. After the Civil War, the powers that be and the wealthy needed a certain type of agricultural worker who could do certain things on the farm and do so at a very low, if no pay at all. So Louisiana, being the state it is, came up with a process to where they lowered the amount of people needed to convict someone from 12 out of 12 to, back then it was 9 out of 12. And when you got convicted, the state would lease the convict to a plantation owner. And that process was called convict leasing. Mm-hmm. And the first plantation and the biggest plantation was located in none other than Angola, Louisiana, which is still a functioning plantation. They have farm, cattle, you name it, they have it out there. So the state was making money off of people being convicted. So is it reasonable to conclude that the state profits off of people being in prison? Well, obviously, because it enters into an agreement with a major corporation, a for-profit corporation, to keep its prison full. And that's why we have some crimes with what's called a mandatory minimum sentence, which means the judge can't even help you. You have to go to prison for that period of time. So I hate to give it in this term, but you're looking down a barrel of the gun and not the smart end. Okay? You are looking at a dangerous situation. You go to court if you have a jury trial, because now if you're 17, you get treated like an adult, then you go to court, it's up to a jury, and there's a lot of things that happen before you even make it to that point. A lot of times the judges can control what evidence comes in and not comes in, and what can be said and not be said, and things of that nature. And by the time you go through that process, you may not have much of a case. So the deck is truly stacked against us.
Wow. So Tommy, have you ran into the situation, as we transition here a little bit, have you ever had the situation when you had a young man, young woman in your office, and you sitting behind your desk and said, if someone would have just gotten to this kid a little sooner?
Yeah. Jack, the stories I could share, I'll put it to you like this. When I first graduated law school, I was so happy. And here I am as a 50-year-old man, been doing this a while. I don't want my kids to be a lawyer. My son filled out something when he's in school about what he wanted to be when he grew up, and he said he wanted to be a lawyer. And I promise you, I almost choked because I was eating when I read that. It's heartbreaking. And I know somebody could probably say, well, heartbreaking for him. He ain't the one serving the sentence. Well, that's true. Yes. But it's, to me, no different than watching a 3-year-old playing on the interstate and a bus is coming down the road. I've had them to where they have been wrapped up in a situation where they necessarily did not commit a crime, but it sure did look like it. I've seen situations to where the person who really committed the crime came from an affluent, influential kind of family, but somebody had to take it, and it usually came down to the one who did not have the kind of connections and resources. I think of instances to where I've watched crimes out of necessity, and there are crimes that occur out of necessity. People stealing to eat. I understand that. Actually, I know it's probably not a popular thing to say, but it's my belief, right? You wish you could put your arms around them and help them and talk them out of it, but it can be so tough watching how this life is over something. And usually I got to be clear with you. A lot of times it has to do with like sex. You might have somebody engaging in acts that with somebody just a little bit younger. I mean, it's an invisible line, but there is a line. So you could just be 17 and your girlfriend is 15. Well, guess what? You're going to have some problems, major problems. You're now a registered sex offender.
Right.
If you have smoked a little marijuana, or you took some dope, or you drank so much, and you get on the wheel and you run someone over, Not only do you have to deal with the criminal accountability for what you did, but you have to live with knowing that maybe you killed somebody and maybe someone you cared about. I guess it's just like you see something and you feel so bad for them, but you don't know what you could do for them. And the bad thing is they don't know it. It's like the mouse in the trap. They don't know it. They have no appreciation for
it. What advice would you give to families right now to keep their children from ending up in your office? Facing, time in jail. And not only the ones that are 17 and under, but if parents can do something right now and say something to that 24, 25-year-old, what would you say?
I would say that there's a difference. It's okay to be the parent. You don't have to be friends with your child. You can be friends with your child, but you got to be the parent. Okay. And as the parent, you're a leader, and the leader often has to be the one to enforce an unpopular decision. So every family is different and every child is different. So it's hard to say this is the answer, But one thing I think I would do is get in my child's business. Who are you hanging out with? Where are you going? What are you doing? Make that child go to school. That's part of the other problem. The kids, who do well in school, they seem to do well in life. Okay. A friend of mine always says, you never see a poor nerd. You never saw somebody who was a nerd and all of a sudden they're broke. No, most of the time they do very well. So they have to do well in school. They have to go to school. The other side of that is, and I really hate to say it, but let's just have this difficult conversation. The truth is, we're in a society where a lot of these kids do not have parents. Or maybe they have parents, but the parents, their number one concern is not the child. Which I think is a child raising a child at that point. Because, as you know, Jack, it's hard being a parent. It is hard. Look, it is hard. It reminds me of something I saw on TV once. It was a movie that my little boy liked to watch. It was Mr. Peabody, and he wanted to adopt a kid, and this was a genius dog, and he was like, well, how hard could it be? And the judge just kind of gave him a look like, you about to find out. But that being said, get involved in your child's life. It's okay to tell them no. Look at their phone, see who they're talking to. And for God's sake, learn about these little codes they have. They got these little codes now. They don't even write a word. They have all these, like, it kind of reminds me of the ghost talkers. You remember the ghost? I think it was the ghost talkers. Nobody could break their code, but they could. Yeah. And then the Nazis had the Enigma. And that's what these kids are doing. They got their little Enigma, this device that they understand, but we don't. And we got to look it up, and even if you trust your child, spot check them. You got to stay on them, because here's what's going to happen. If you don't stay on your child, a prison guard will. Okay. When you're in prison, they'll come and shake down your room. They'll tear up your whole place looking for something. I wish parents would do that, and get them in the school. And when they go to school, you got to respect the school. You got to respect the school. You got to respect the teacher. Even if you got a bad teacher, you got to respect them. You got to be like, well, I have to get through this. So, we've learned so much as a society over the years. It used to be, oh, you just whip them. You just take them out to the woodshed and put that belt on them or that switch on them, and that fixes everything. I'm sorry, my opinion is no, it does not fix everything. Okay. Uh, it could be a tool like any tool, but it's certainly not a cure-all. There's never been such a thing. I heard Jerry Spence give this analogy, and it's always stuck with me. If you have two puppies, okay, born from the same parents, and one puppy goes to a loving family, takes, gets love, affection, and food and water, and is taken care of, that dog's going to turn out a certain way. But if that brother dog is gone to a house where the puppy is mistreated and beaten, and affection is withheld, food is withheld, that dog is going to end up being very aggressive, and the two will not be alike. You know, they won't be alike for that reason. So loving your kids is the most important thing. And love doesn't mean give them everything they want. They don't need the Nintendo Switch 2. They can earn it, but they don't need it.
Right.
And one thing that gets me, for the kids that don't have that, they don't have the loving family. You're not invisible. Some people know this about me. I've been on my own since I was 16 years old. Mm-hmm. Okay. I got to tell you, it was not easy. You feel isolated. You feel like you have nobody. There are a lot of times I didn't have, things in my refrigerator, things like that. I didn't. And it's easy to give in to this feeling of despair. Well, I'm not going to amount to anything anyway. Or how can I move forward if I have all this burden on me? And, the thing that I have to kind of remind myself of even today is, the mistreatment that I may have sustained in life, the unfairness that I was handed at times in life, I didn't let that define who I was now. I had teachers in school who mistreated me. There's just no question about it. And yet here I am today, living life, trying to make a difference in my community, have a great profession. And I did not let those injustices and mistreatments define me. Okay? So for the kids who have nobody, well, you have to love yourself. You got to love yourself first. And if you're alone, it's okay. You're alone maybe now. But life goes on. You're just starting out. And I hate to put it in that way, Jack, but I see this a lot. I see this situation where kids get mistreated, ignored, abused. People just wonder, well, why is this child in prison? Really? Y'all didn't see this coming? Now, sometimes it's because, there's just bad parents. Sometimes there are people who really need mental health assistance and they will not go get it, and that comes out. I'd also tell parents, watch yourself. Kids have this ability of, even if you slip up and you say that one little foul-mouthed word, they can remember that like you wouldn't believe. It's like the IRS, they'll audit you from something you said 3 years ago, and they remember it. So if they see mama slapping daddy or daddy slapping mama, then they start thinking, well, that's just life. And if you have screwed up, it's always time to change. There's times to admit your mistakes and move on.
Do you feel, Tommy, that we have become desensitized to the violence in the community? And in your opinion, how will we reset that? Because I tell you, just in the last 3-4 weeks here in Rapides Parish, Alexandria specifically, we had, I think, 7-8 incidents, 8 injuries or so, or something to that effect. And then just last weekend, we added 5 people injured on one night. And then just before this show, we put up an article stating that 7 people were arrested. And, I'm looking at this stuff constantly. It's a constant reminder, Houston, we got a problem. But it seems like, it's on deaf ears with so many people, people who could actually make a change, or actually start a conversation or what have you. But yet and still, we go about our ways. We have the next meeting, we have the next church service, and it's almost as if this stuff doesn't even exist.
Well, I'm guilty of that too. I'm guilty of it. We had a family vacation last week, and a friend of mine who was there, we were talking. I think 2 people or 3 people may have gotten shot and killed in Alexandria, I think last week. And it was like, and it's raining today. So there's no doubt we have become desensitized. There's no question in my mind about that. And it's not a local thing, because I have 1 foot in Baton Rouge. I'm a professor there as well. And our reputation in this city is not confined to this city. I mean, people across this nation have heard about Alexandria. And, you talk to them about it, and they're appalled because we only have 40,000, 42,000 people in Alexandria.
Yep, somewhere around that number.
And we're talking to people in New Orleans, Cincinnati, Chicago, things like that. And they're like, y'all have that many? So we have been desensitized to it. I wish I could tell you how we could reset it. Obviously it's not going to happen by the government. Because, and what I mean by that is the government only comes in after the fact, right. Once there's been a shooting. So, I don't know. I know there's a lot of people who have changed their behavior in Alexandria. I know a lot of people who will not leave their house after 8 p.m. I know people who have teenagers, and they will not, their teenager needs to be home by 9 o'clock. So we're not doing anything apparently to change it, but we're allowing it to change us.
That's right.
And that is just not acceptable, and I wish I knew the answer. I really do. I think what used to happen though, Jack, is back in the day, as we say, if we had an disagreement, you'd go out in the parking lot and you would handle it. The answer now for all disputes is, well, I'm gonna shoot him. What a big man am I? What a big bad girl am I? I can pull a trigger. And what are you accomplishing? Nothing at all. And sometimes I'd really like to know what this is truly about. What really caused you to want to shoot somebody? I remember when I was growing up, the Twinkie defense came out. I don't know if you remember that. It's been a while, but the Twinkie defense, they claimed, oh, well, it was all the sugar somebody ate that made them want to go do this. And then for a long time, they talk about rock music. Oh, rock music is making people do this. And then they said the movies. Oh, the movies are making people do it. And then the video games. Well, hell, at this point, we done blamed everybody but ourselves. Okay. Hollywood is not making us turn into werewolves. We watch werewolf movies all the time. None of us have turned into Jason Voorhees. I mean, none of us has turned us. We haven't turned into the Hulk or Iron Man, so that's not making us do this. I don't know what is. I think the root cause is we've lost our way in having regard for the life of other people. And I do believe these things have to start at home. You can have a disagreement with somebody. Let me be the first to tell you, I am not perfect. I don't want to be perfect. Perfect people are not interesting. Okay. And I certainly don't want to sound like a preachy about this, but I want y'all to know that when my son is only 9, he'll be 10 pretty soon. When he comes home and he has a dispute with his friend, it's always a blow up. And then you try to talk them into, well, wait a minute, you got to look at things from the other person's perspective. Maybe if we could just do that a little bit, consider what is going on through someone else's perspective, we might understand it. Maybe Jack insulted me today. Okay. Well, maybe it's worth thinking, well, all right, well, I wonder what might be going on with Jack. Did he get bad news this morning? Things of that nature. This is one thing that we like to talk about sometimes. I'm guilty of this. I've been driving down the road and somebody's cut me off and I want to give them the middle, you know what?
Right.
I immediately get mad. Okay. And I know I'm not the only one, but let's just pick on me. It's okay. I'm fair game tonight. And we never think, well, did that person just get a call from the hospital saying his wife is dying? Did he just get some terrible news that he has to go deal with? We never think about that, but we do think, how did his behavior affect us? And maybe we need to spend a little more time as a community. A community means us coming together, maybe thinking about the other. Instead of the self, think of the other. And by thinking of the other doesn't mean we have to agree with them and accept their philosophy and politics and religion and everything else. But maybe we need to recognize that people got some problems just like we do.
Tommy, a lot of the comments that are sitting out here are, it starts at the home.
Yeah, I see that.
It starts at home, and but it's going to take a little bit more than the home. The reality of the situation. It's going to take a whole lot more than the home to reverse the decades of problems that we currently have right now.
And one thing that I think of, and it's been a problem my whole life, there is nothing here for the youth to do. And we've all heard it. Idle hands is the what?
The devil's workshop.
Right? So there's nothing for them to do. I wish, kids would understand the beauty of fishing, fishing on the banks, working the land, things of that nature. As you know, I'm a big believer in martial arts.
Right.
Not necessarily for the combat purpose, but the overall wellness that you get from it. But these young people, they need something to do. And when there's absolutely nothing to do, they normally might turn to drugs or something like that. And if they're not loved in their household, they're going to find somebody on the street who proclaims to have some love for them too. Right.
Tommy, before we get out of here, did you have anything else you want to say about it? Tomorrow night, just as an if, we're talking to the defense tonight. We're going to be talking to the prosecutor on tomorrow, and and hear what they say when just the opposite of what you are doing right now, defending that person that's in that courtroom. They, on the other hand, are representing the people, and they're saying, "Hey, you did something wrong." And so we're going to be having that conversation on tomorrow evening. But before we get out of here, did you have anything else that you'd like to say? You
You know, I think people kind of think, well, if you get a lawyer, you'll get off. No, no, that's not that's not always a guarantee. Um, and even though my heart is defending people, I do understand where the state is coming from. You can't have all this killing, right? You can't have all this. Here's my I guess closing thoughts. We're past the boiling point, okay, around here. So what's going to happen now? People are fed up. the the police are going to start cracking down at some point. The prosecution, they have a job to do. It's one that I do respect. I don't take anything away from the state doing its job. I mean, you know, we got to have some repercussions, or we're just living in a lawless society, and none of us want that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have judges who they have a job too, and a lot of times they want to be tough on crime because they're looking out for their community. So why take this chance? What I would like to know is, what is the insight here? What's the end game? What is it that somebody thinks they're getting from this lifestyle? You know, I'll tell you, there's nothing. You know, I've represented people in gangs, and you know what? When they go in prison, their friends from the gang is not coming up to the jail. They're not putting money on their books. They just move on and find their next sucker, you know? So maybe just take time to try to understand who you are and where you want to be in 5 years, right? If you're young and you don't know what to do, just think about where you want to be in 5 years. You might be going through something right now, but that will pass, okay? And, you know, if anyone is young and you really feel like you just, you know, you're really lost, you're welcome to give me a call. You know, I didn't have a great childhood either, and you know, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to help, right, Jack? I mean, we want to help.
Yeah.
We don't want you going to prison, and we don't want anybody getting shot.
No.
You know,
Want to be on the proactive end, Tommy. You know, and if that means getting the you know, over the next couple of days, we're going to be talking about the DJ Sports Camp over at Ash this summer, and one of the big components on that is mental health services and just general services for families and different things of that nature. So over the next couple of days, we're going to be talking about, you know, if parents are, you know, at their wits' end and they just don't know what to do. You know, hopefully we're going to talk to some of the agencies here in the community who will inspire folk to begin to pick up that telephone and make that phone call and you know, get the help that they need. It's okay to say, hey, I'm struggling. It's okay to say, I don't know about tomorrow. And because there's somebody out there that has some tools or has some suggestions to help you get through it.
well, and here's the other thing. Yes, I know what it's like. You tell your little kid no. You just say that little word, no, N-O, and they have a meltdown. They have a tantrum. And yes, it gets on your nerves. It's like fingernails on chalk. I promise you that little tantrum is not going to be nearly as painful as getting that call at 2 a.m. your child is in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And then to start the hell that we have been talking about for an hour now.
Mm-hmm.
So tell them no, give them a purpose, you know. Again, one of the things I do believe about, like I was talking about the martial arts, I have established scholarships for a couple of years now for people to go because I believe in that.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't met too many. I don't think I've met any people that do martial arts that are dealing and stealing. You know, I just haven't. And I think it's not necessarily just martial arts. I think it's having a purpose.
Mhm.
You know?
And you see that same concept, Tommy, with the discipline with the young men and women over at Legendary. You see that with the discipline with the young men on the basketball teams at all of our different schools, football teams. You know, they have a purpose, and the discipline is there.
But you know, here's the downside of that.
Mm.
I have watched parents say, bring their child to martial, and I've done martial arts for a very long time, most of my life. They bring a child and they'll tell the instructor, I want my child to have discipline. I want my child to have discipline. And then as soon as the new wears off and the child wants to quit, the parent's like, okay, well, look, little Johnny, he don't want to come here anymore. Well, do you know why your child? This is what I'd love to tell them, right? I mean, I know it's not politically correct, but I think I would like to tell them, well, the reason your child doesn't have discipline is because you lack discipline. You made a commitment, you see it through. Okay? So telling them no is okay. But how can a parent not have the discipline and expect the child to have it? You know? I mean, if you got a parent who's laid up on the couch drinking all day, watching the soaps, you know, that's what we used to call it, watching the soaps or the stories, well, how do you expect your child to go to school and work hard?
Right.
It ain't going to happen. They are going to be what they see.
That's right. That's right. Well, Tommy, I want to thank you for spending this evening with us tonight. Conversations like this one, Tommy, aren't easy, but they are necessary. If we want different outcomes for our community, we have to be willing to force hard truth, ask real questions, and speak directly to the challenges our young people are facing every day. We hope tonight's discussion gave you something to take back to your family, your neighborhood, your classroom, because change starts at home and it starts with us, not tomorrow, but today. We want to thank our loyal followers and advertisers who continue to stand with the truth and transparency, especially in times when that seems to rattle some folk. Thank you to Sadler's Towing, Long's Products, and Legendary Kung Fu and Chai Chi. And to our class of 2025 sponsors, Attorney Tiffany Sanders, Sadler's Towing again, and District Attorney Philip Terrell. This is Jack, and this is Let's Talk on UrbanCast. We don't make the news over here, and we just tell it. See you next time.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Hang in there, Todd.
Hey, did you know Long's Products is a family-owned janitorial supply with mops, brooms, trash bags, and they even have food service disposables, carry-out plates, and to-goes? Check us out.